In San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, betting on the cloud pays off. IBM's fourth quarter sales beat estimates thanks to double-digit gains in its cloud business. So what is next? Plus, the World Economic Forum in Davos gets into full swing. We'll bring the highlights, including conversations with the CEOs of UPS and Verizon. And Netflix's Hollywood milestone, the streaming giant gets its first ever Big Picture Oscar nomination, cementing its place in the film industry. But first to our top story, IBM shares jumped in after-hours trading after reporting fourth quarter revenue that beat estimates. The company came in with revenue hitting $21.8 billion, above estimates of $21.7 billion. On top of that, cloud revenue for the full year jumped 12% to $19 billion. To discuss, we've got Bloomberg Intelligence's senior analyst Anurag Rana in New York. Anurag, IBM shares shot up after hours. Is this a surprise?
The surprise actually was one of their divisions called Global Business Services, saw some very strong consulting numbers, which, to us means that enterprise tech spending is very strong right now. And it's, the follow-through effect from a very strong 2018.
Well, IBM has been saying over and over again that, the cloud would be big, IBM would get there, but there had been a lot of doubt as to whether IBM could really keep up with some of the perhaps more nimble competitors. Is this proof that IBM can live up to these promises?
See, as far as cloud is concerned, we think the real test is going to be when the Red Hat acquisition is closed and they are able to offer more products. Now, their cloud revenue is somewhere between 10 and 20%, depending on the quarter. That's far lower than even the larger players such as Amazon and Microsoft. They're growing cloud at a much, much faster pace on the infrastructure side. And on the application side, companies like Salesforce and Workday, they're growing north of 20%. So, in contrast, IBM being such a small player compared to all of them, its growth rate is okay, but it's not great.
For many years, IBM has also been touting some of these other initiatives like Watson, like what it's doing with the Weather Channel, like quantum computing. And the question has always been, well, when is this going to add to the bottom line? I recently spoke with IBM CEO Ginni Rometty, and she actually had some specifics in terms of when quantum computing revenue would be impactful for IBM. Take a listen to what she had to say.
What's the time frame till quantum really produces commercial results? And we're probably in a 2 to 5 year time frame that you'll actually start to see commercial businesses doing real commercial applications, and then that means revenue.
Is this going to be a big business for IBM?
See, that would be a decade away easily because, think about it, just to even come up with $1 billion or so, it would take several years to get there. And the size of the company is, $70-80 billion in revenue. So, it would be a very small drop. The real big, again, one of the things we said was when the Red Hat acquisition is closed, they give you a lot more software products for them to sell and make them a lot more relevant when it comes to private cloud or hybrid cloud.
Meantime, I have a chart here in the Bloomberg looking at the three most valuable companies, Apple, Amazon, and Microsoft. You can see the blue and yellow line, Amazon and Microsoft surging ahead, taking the market cap crown from Apple. And of course, we see the market certainly favoring growth in software, growth in services. Does IBM have what it takes, have what investors are optimistic about?
See, as far as cloud is concerned, we think IBM is, just in third or fourth when it comes to public cloud. But they can really make a dent with this Red Hat acquisition and be one of the top leading players when it comes to private cloud installations or when it comes to hybrid cloud. That's where a large portion of the spending is going to go for the next several years. In our view, Microsoft is very well positioned, and the Red Hat deal can help IBM's strategic positioning as well.
That said, it's a huge deal, $33 billion. What's the confidence that's going to close and there won't be a competing bid?
Oh, that's a very tough question. I will be not the right person to answer that. But, having said that, we haven't seen any bids at this point. So, we'll see what happens in the next 6 months. But if this does close, it gives IBM, we think, again, we think it makes them relevant again when it comes to, next generation computing.
Bloomberg's Anurag Rana, thank you so much for weighing in. Well, shares of eBay surged during Tuesday trade. At one point, the stock was up as much as 12% on news that Elliott Management sent a letter to eBay's board detailing, quote, urgently needed steps to improve the company. The reason, according to the letter, the, quote, guiding philosophy of the plan, capital plan, is that eBay can unlock substantial value today by refocusing on its core business, emphasizing the right strategic initiatives, improving operations, and enhancing oversight. For more, I want to get to Bloomberg Tech's Spencer Soper in Seattle. So, Spencer, what exactly, break down the five-part plan, what Elliott wants eBay to do?
Well, the only way to interpret, refocusing on the core asset means they're looking for them to sell StubHub and the classified advertising business. So again, just looking at investor pressure to further pare down eBay, just like we saw, a few years ago with the split from between eBay and PayPal.
So eBay's statement here, we appreciate Elliott's recognition of the strength and power of eBay's business and will carefully review and evaluate Elliott's proposals. We look forward to the opportunity to engage with Elliott as we do with all shareholders. That said, if you take away StubHub, if you take away the classifieds business, what's left?
Well, it's still their core business, which is the online marketplace. That's a place where people spend. It's going to close. It's been closing in on $100 billion a year. Probably hit that mark or come very close to it this year when we see their year-end results. I mean, for 2018, and so that's what's left. It's still a big chunk, and it's also potentially a very prime acquisition target. If eBay were to shed some of the things that maybe a retailer like Walmart or Target or a tech company like Google might be interested in, to get in and just kind of give a shove back to Amazon, if they lose some of the appendages, it might be a more affordable and more appealing acquisition target for some of these other companies, and all of that could be good for big eBay stakeholders.
How competitive, though, is eBay really with Amazon when it comes to the marketplace? I mean, when you think e-commerce, the first thing you think of is Amazon. When I think of maybe I want to buy something used or secondhand, then maybe I think of eBay.
That's been the real challenge. eBay is growing. It's not like it's dead, so it's still growing. It's just growing more slowly than e-commerce spending overall. So with every year, it's losing market share and its relevance is shrinking. So it's not only losing market share to Amazon, it's also losing market share to Walmart, to Target, to all of these big retailers that are upping their e-commerce game. But it's still very big and has $180 million customers worldwide. So there's still a lot of things that people could do with there.
Meantime, another activist shareholder, Starboard Value, has reportedly built up a big position in eBay. The shares are up on this news. What are next steps here?
Well, this is really kind of judgment time for eBay CEO Devin Wenig. He's been preaching the same philosophy for a few years now, since he took over the company, even before he took over the company, because we knew he was going to emerge as the CEO post-split. So it's up to him now to either, if he's able to deliver results. I'm really watching what the fourth quarter is like. If he delivers some results, some of this pressure might fade. If it's a disappointing fourth quarter, you're going to expect more investors to jump on the Elliott Management bandwagon.
All right, Spencer Soper for us, who covers eBay and Amazon. Spencer, thanks so much for that. Now, to a story we are following, the Apple-Qualcomm antitrust trial. Qualcomm's lawyers got Apple to concede that it had nowhere else to turn to get iPhones 4G ready. Apple's director of cellular admitted that no other suppliers could deliver to its 4G specifications other than Qualcomm. This is a point Qualcomm has been arguing in its fight with Apple, that it was a business need and not exclusionary practices that led Apple to become dependent on its technology. The trial will continue for 3 more sessions before closing arguments on the 1st of February. Coming up, leaders in tech and business are converging on Davos, Switzerland for the World Economic Forum. We will bring you the highlights as the event gets into full swing. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. Listen on the Bloomberg app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. UPS UPS CEO David Abney says he doesn't see an economic slowdown in the United States. He also expects online businesses to keep growing. He spoke to Bloomberg's Tom Keene at the World Economic Forum in Davos.
And I really am not seeing an economic slowdown, especially in the U.S. Just to give you an example, and small businesses played a big role in this. For the peak season that we just completed, retail grew, estimated at 5.6% over last year. Online retail grew 17, 18%. So there is still a healthy increase in consumers.
I want to get to that small company out in Seattle in a minute, but this is really important. In the media, I'm guilty of this, and so is John Farrow's not guilty of this. Farrow had to leave, folks. It was too cold for him. But the answer is, we get wrong retail doom and gloom, the world's coming to an end, and you're telling me online all wrapped up did double digit.
It absolutely did, and it has done so over the last few years. We continue to see online growing, but for all that, online is still 13, 14% of total retail, so it still has a long ways to go.
How are you and your good competition going to defend against Mr. Bezos, Amazon, and their desire to take over the movement of parcels?
Amazon is a big customer of ours. We've had a long-term relationship with them. That being said, at the same time, like many large companies, they outsource and insource. So we do watch carefully what they do, and then we react to that. But most people think of Amazon when they think of e-commerce. We are focusing so much more on all these hundreds of thousands of small and mid-sized businesses.
Why can't they do business with Amazon or your good competition, Federal Express?
They can do business with Amazon. Many of them choose not to because they want to control the marketing rights, and they don't want someone else to have access to their information. We can provide them, and I'll give you just one example, is where to go. And it's really a brokerage of warehousing. So we can match the available warehousing space with these small and mid-sized customers' fulfillment needs. That can allow them to give 2-day service just like the big retailers do. But they're doing it with our resources or with our technology instead of their own.
That was UPS CEO David Abney in Davos with Tom Keene. More from Davos. Verizon CEO Hans Vestberg talked about the importance of 5G and competition in the market with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow at the World Economic Forum. Take a listen.
I'm excited over bringing new technologies, and of course, I think that Verizon is one of the best technology companies in the world, and to have the chance to do that, I think that was...
But you're Senior Vice President of Triage at the same time. The quick math is $4 billion for this, $4 billion for that, and you've already taken a write-down on oath as well. You're the new kid in the corporate boardroom of Verizon. How are you treating the mop-up of the acquisitions of Yahoo and the rest?
I think that first of all you need to split the different things here. We did a write-off of the goodwill. I mean, still many of the things that we have in the Yahoo assets are great assets that is really fitting into our strategy. I think the difference is that we had another revenue projection from the beginning, which we don't have anymore. And then from impairment point of view, you need to take that. So I don't think it's a very strange thing. We still have the assets, and we still think they're already good.
Well, let's talk about some of the strategy that you're overlooking at the moment. I was saying a couple of months ago, Tom and I were talking, you don't make the former CEO of Ericsson the CEO of Verizon if you want to build a media conglomerate. Now, some of your peers, your competitors, are going around dropping some serious money building media conglomerates. Why is Verizon not doing that?
I think we build it on our strong assets. I mean, our network is our stronghold. We have the best network in the US and probably one of the best in the world. We have a great distribution. We have customers all the way from consumers to big enterprises to small and medium, as well as we have a good brand name. So I see our network as a service and seeing that we're going to work with partners instead of having all our assets ourselves, and I think that's how we're going to leverage our investments.
Is there a downside by not going out there and building this big base of content in the way that some of the big players are in your world at the moment?
I think there's so many options when you're sort of a provider of network technology today, so it's going to be different routes you take, and so it's different. I mean, we take our route, others take in there, and they believe that's the right. We build it on our strength and our assets. hands.
So let's talk about 5G if we possibly can. What are the goals here, and why is it so important here at Davos? Because we hear the titles of some of these cozy panels that take place, Globalization 4.0. Why is 5G so important to that?
I think that 5G is so different from any previous wireless technologies because they have been based on throughput and speed only. 5G has 8 different capabilities. I call them currencies.
Right.
Everything from low latency, battery lifetime, serving millions of IoT devices, etc. So suddenly you have so many more use cases. Of course, consumer use case is one, but you can do 5G home, you can do 5G for enterprises, which is very different.
Everybody's distributing to the cell phone. And the arch battle in America, everyone listening to this on radio, watching this on TV, is glued to their cell phones. Mohammed Al-Arian out on Instagram was like 5 hours a day. Al-Arian's on the phone. I'm only on the phone like 20 minutes a day. But Hans Vestberg, how are you going to battle with T-Mobile? You got to come back against T-Mobile. You got to do it on price. But what is the pixie dust that gets new momentum against T-Mobile?
No, I think that first of all, we are sort of a company that are serving many types of customers. Of course, in the consumer segment, we are still continuing with the best network, and I think that's so important that they have a high quality and high performance, and that we're going to keep. I mean, we reported our figures, wireless figures for the fourth quarter. We added 1.2 million new ads and 650,000 net add phones. So I think we have a good momentum in the business, and we have had so for quite a while.
Verizon CEO Hans Vestberg there from Davos. Meantime, Google is considering pulling its news service from Europe as regulators work towards a controversial copyright law. The new rules would require web companies to pay publishers when their articles show up in news search results or are shared by users. The internet giant plans to review details of the directive before making an official decision. Meantime, Google set a record for lobbying spending in the United States over 2018 at $21 million. This, according to a filing on Tuesday. Coming up, Netflix is dominating the Oscars. How Hollywood is reacting to the streaming giant sweeping the industry. Next. And Bloomberg Tech live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology and follow our global breaking news network TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg. The U.S. Labor Department has accused Oracle of shorting women and minority workers $400 million in wages. According to a new legal filing, the tech company steered these employees into jobs at lower-level positions and imposed an extreme preference for immigrant visa holders who would come in at lower salaries. Pay records obtained by the agency show Oracle paid women, Black, and Asian employees less than others for similar jobs in IT, product development, and support. The probe is one of several ongoing investigations into possible discrimination against visa holders. Oracle declined Bloomberg's request for comment on this story. Netflix has one more reason to brag in Hollywood. The streaming giant scored 15 Oscar nominations Tuesday, including its first Best Picture nod for its film Roma. Roma got 10 nominations overall, including for Best Director and Cinematography, tying with The Favorite for the most nods this year. The recognition by the Academy comes amid news that the company is joining major Hollywood studios in the Motion Picture Association of America. Joining us from LA to discuss, Bloomberg's Anousheh Sakoui. So, Anousheh, not a huge surprise for Netflix, given all of the awards Roma has racked up to this point, but certainly welcome news. What is the significance of a Best Picture nomination for Netflix?
It's Hollywood's highest prize, and it's voted on by, a large group of the industry, but it's voted on by the industry. It's not voted on by some group of journalists like the Golden Globes is. So it really is representation that Netflix is really considered one of, I don't want to say one of us because it doesn't include me, but like one of them, one of Hollywood. So, I mean, there are up to 10 that can be in the Best Picture nomination, but it's the highest prize. So, and it's a black and white film. It's very little dialogue to some degree. There are no stars. So it's really on the based, just the film itself, the cinematography, the direction, the acting. It's quite a raw film that it's got this far. So I think it says a lot about the, what they've done to get Cuarón, Alfonso Cuarón, to make the film there and to market his film, and that says a lot to filmmakers and creators who might be convinced to go to Netflix.
Still, it appears the theater companies AMC, Regal are excluding Roma from their Oscar showcases. They're only playing the Best Picture nominees that played by the rules, which is, a traditional theatrical release, 90 days from being available to the public. AMC gave us a statement saying for more than a decade, movie lovers have enjoyed the AMC Best Picture Showcase to catch up on nominated films that played at AMC throughout the prior year. This year, Academy members nominated a film that was never licensed to play in AMC theaters. As such, it is not included in the AMC Best Picture Showcase. Is that a little sour grapes, or do they have a point? Is this all coming to a head?
It's not sour grapes. It's just their stand. They really don't want to cave in any capacity they can when it comes to this exclusive run of film, exclusive run that they have, and this window of 3 months. It has, over the years, whittled down. Back in the day, remember, it used to take forever before you could see a movie at home. Now it's about 3 months, and it's usually Disney movies, the big superhero movies that last the longest before they're available at home. And Netflix did part with its strategy with Roma, and it gave it just 3 weeks before it let it stream at home. But even then, the big theaters weren't going to show it. And a lot of people, when this film is nominated, or say when it wins, yeah, they can see it at home, but they might choose to go out and maybe as a date night or whatever, go and see it at a cinema and pay for popcorn, and that's the business. Right. That's the theater business, and they're choosing to not show it for that reason, for this sort of, this principle. And it's going to be a big question in this next year, next 2 years, as other streaming platforms come online, if this is going to come to a head.
Right, and Netflix only, meantime, seems to be cementing its position in Hollywood with this now confirmation that it's joining the Motion Picture Association of America. Anusha, I'll let you go and continue your reporting on that. Thank you so much for joining us. Coming up, we discuss what the future holds for Huawei as the Chinese tech giant continues to push for global growth despite the U.S. urging allies to cut ties. And later in the show, the prolonged U.S. government shutdown putting cybersecurity at risk. We'll talk about where hackers may spot weakness. This is Bloomberg. Global Link, where we join Bloomberg Daybreak Australia to bring you the latest in global tech news. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco.
I'm Cheryl Yan in New York. And I'm Heidi Stroud-Potts in Sydney. Let's take a look at those top global tech stories of the day for you. Well, IBM reported fourth quarter revenue of $21.8 billion. That's just above estimates. Full-year cloud revenue grew 12% year over year. Remember, IBM agreed to buy Red Hat last year to boost its cloud business. Tencent and NetEase were again left out when regulators greenlit the latest batch of online games in China, spurring concerns that the region's largest gaming companies may have to wait longer than anticipated to start making money off hit titles. Tencent's pipeline has been on ice since March now. That was when regulators halted the release of new titles in the world's largest gaming market. And Dyson moves its headquarters from the UK to Singapore. The company's recent growth has been driven by a growing customer base in Asia. Dyson CEO Jim Rowan told the press that the move to Singapore was not due to tax or fears of Brexit. Meanwhile, Huawei's Deputy Chairman Ken Hu spoke at a panel in Davos, weighing in on the ongoing impact of the global trade war.
We've seen, the damaging effect on many of the, companies, including Huawei and some of the sectors from the trade war. And as the technology industry, we're highly relying on the global supply chain and the global, innovation ecosystem. So we are probably, suffering the most right now.
This is all while the U.S. is urging its allies to avoid using Huawei's equipment for fear it can be used in espionage, something the company has repeatedly denied. Joining us to discuss Huawei, here is Sam Sachs, Cybersecurity Policy and China Digital Economy Fellow at New America. Sam, great to have you with us. So Huawei really taking a hit from all different fronts. We're not talking only about the U.S., but also Europe and elsewhere that are reviewing Huawei in their telecom industry. How will this affect China's ambitions for their Made in China 2025 policy?
The Chinese government has stated that they want to have Chinese global brands that are competing in high-tech sectors. So it's a real blow for companies like Huawei, which have managed to be global titans in many regards. And I think that a lot of Chinese tech companies, and beyond the tech sector as well, are beginning to reevaluate their plans to move into markets which are subject to U.S. influence on this.
Sam, there's certainly an argument to be made that regional economies are more closely intertwined than we understand. I have a chart here in the Bloomberg which shows that if manufacturing slows down in China, that actually impacts the United States economy. Does he have a point when he says that the trade war is going to be damaging for global tech?
The reality is that the tech sectors are highly interconnected, not just the U.S. and China, but globally. And so when we're looking at unwinding supply chains, walking back joint R&D, global partnerships, this is something that is not easy to do. There are a number of U.S. companies that are seriously reevaluating, reorienting away from China. But there are frankly some things that are not possible and are extremely costly to undertake. But these conversations are certainly going on.
And of course, Canada also reviewing the use of Huawei or the access of Huawei into their 5G network. We're actually able to catch up with the Foreign Minister of Canada, Chrystia Freeland, at Davos. So take a listen to what she had to say.
Canada has spoken to the United States about the case. It's a decision for the United States whether to seek an extradition of someone from Canada, whether it is a Canadian or a visitor. That's up to them. And then they have to make the case for the extradition in our legal system.
Getting Huawei CFO extradited to the U.S. could take years. Will this be the thorn in U.S.-China relations long after a deal is potentially made?
So over the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of rumors. Is Meng actually going to be extradited? Is she going to be released? And there's a lot of uncertainty around this. It's so sensitive because of the trade negotiations. But the reality is, look, even if Meng is released, the U.S. ambitions to dismantle Huawei are much bigger than this arrest on Meng. There is a whole of government effort to take down Huawei, and I think we're going to see it even if the Meng case drags on.
But it was not just about Huawei. Last year, we saw this supplier ban against ZTE as well. Of course, that was eventually lifted. That nearly crushed the company. Huawei has some vertical integration, so I wonder how will it compare and how well positioned is Huawei compared to ZTE last year in overcoming all of this?
ZTE was so dependent on the U.S. market that a denial ban would have brought the company to its knees. I think it's not as grave for Huawei, but when we're talking about the U.S. going out to the Five Eyes partners and saying, block Huawei from being in your 5G networks, that's crippling to a company that is really ahead and looking at entering the market and being a leader on that front. So they're going to have to reassess their business model.
Sam, I'm curious what you read between the lines, between what we heard from that Canadian foreign minister in terms of how well the United States and Canada are actually aligned here, given the conversations that the U.S. is having with other allies around the world to block Huawei.
Look, Canada is in a very tricky position because they're essentially paying the cost for an issue which is between the U.S. and China right now. And it's very dicey. So I'm not going to understate the complication of the position that Canada's in.
So do you think that the U.S. can successfully get some of these other allies, other countries where Huawei does business, on side?
A number of countries are already having serious talks about reevaluating whether to have Huawei in their network. We're going to have to look and see, is the UK, for example, going to walk back the model that they have used for years where they evaluate the cybersecurity risks to having Huawei part of their network? I think that's been the model for how you can do it. And so if they're beginning to reevaluate that, you have Germany, others, Japan, this could be the bellwether of whether Huawei is going to need to reorient this global ambition in the 5G space.
So last year in December, we saw China proposing this new IP law that would ban some companies that infringe on intellectual property, from financing, bonds, government funding. How seriously is China taking all of these international concerns? Are they really putting efforts out there to actually address these issues?
The leadership of Xi Jinping has doubled down on an effort to reduce reliance on foreign suppliers. It's been something they've talked about doing for a long time, and I think after ZTE was almost brought to its knees because of U.S. actions, this is a government in Beijing that said, look, this is a critical vulnerability and we need to develop our own indigenous industry. We can't be reliant on these links.
There have been conflicting reports about the progress of the trade talks, Sam, including a report today that talks have been canceled with certain Chinese officials, and then the White House denied that, said talks are continuing. There's a meeting with a Chinese official at the end of the month that could be very critical. How unprecedented is the lack of transparency here in the back and forth?
To me, what's unprecedented is the lack of coordination within the U.S. bureaucracy on this. The fact that to this day, we still don't know whether President Trump knew going into his dinner with Xi Jinping that Meng had been arrested or not, right? So the fact that this went on with a DOJ action simultaneously to an incredibly sensitive meeting between the two state leaders, that's the unprecedented factor. You layer on lack of transparency on top of it, and I think we're in a whole new world.
Right, and the administration claimed that he did not know. Okay, Sam Sachs, fellow at New America, thank you so much. Always great to have you here on Bloomberg. Much more ahead on Bloomberg Television. This is Bloomberg.
I never would discount the European banks. Again, they're in a different phase of recovery than the U.S. banks. And so, one, don't overestimate the U.S. bank position and don't underestimate the European bank's position.
As the U.S. government shutdown hits its 32nd day Tuesday, the impact on cybersecurity is becoming more clear. Aside from furloughed employees at departments like the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, one new report is highlighting the risk to government websites. According to cybersecurity firm Netcraft, since January 16th, more than 130 government sites are now at risk. Why? Because their security certificates are lapsing. To tell us what this means and more, our Bloomberg White House and cybersecurity reporter, Aliza Sebenius in Washington. So, Aliza, what does this mean?
Hi, thank you for having me. I think what this report reflects is the fact that with less federal employees working on cybersecurity, the employees that are involved are having to triage and pick and choose among the most important projects, which is why perhaps we see things like security certificates for websites lapsing, because there simply isn't enough people to triage and handle all of the tasks.
Longer term, the big question is, will this make the United States weaker in cyberspace?
One of the big challenges in cybersecurity for government jobs is attracting and retaining the right talent. So given the number of very well compensated, very desirable jobs in cybersecurity in the private sector, the government is constantly looking to attract and retain new talent. So experts are saying that this could be problematic because things like the government shutdown make cybersecurity jobs in the government less desirable. Similarly, it could make contracts with the government seem more risky to top private sector companies.
Meantime, you've got U.S. intelligence today warning that U.S. adversaries like China, like Russia, are taking advantage of this global turmoil to essentially threaten the United States. You know, what does the U.S. intelligence strategy released today mean for cybersecurity?
The U.S. intelligence strategy released today is really showing a commitment to cybersecurity. They recognize the effects that cyber threats can pose in terms of public health, public safety, trust in basic institutions and global norms. And the new strategy has made a commitment to devote intelligence resources as well as aid to help other parts of the government deter these threats.
Meantime, you've got a lot of sources in the cybersecurity community. What are they saying?
They're saying that we need to wait and see downstream how this affects cybersecurity. There could be possibilities for after the fact taking measures that would mitigate the damage, but right now it seems too soon to tell the full set of effects on cybersecurity of the government shutdown.
All right, Bloomberg's Aliza Sebanius, thanks so much for your reporting on this. Well, a familiar refrain before President Trump and Congress passed a $1.5 trillion corporate tax cut was companies will use this for buybacks. Well, now 1 year later, we've got some data that shows that really happened. A new Bloomberg Business Week article took a look at how 4 major companies fared after the cuts were enacted, and when it came to buybacks, Apple spent $72 billion as of September of last year. Let's get to Washington, where the author of this piece, Bloomberg's corporate tax reporter Laura Davidson, is standing by. So talk to us about how Apple compares to all the rest.
So Apple, really compared to every other company, the numbers are just so much of greater scale, obviously. But in terms of trend lines, how they spent their money, it's really in line with what we saw with a lot of companies, what Disney did, what Starbucks, Visa, in that they really put a lot of money into buybacks. They had a lot of extra cash on hand. They saw their tax rate go down. I remember it was 35% down to 21%. And what they heard from investors and what they were looking around, they had sort of a long period of growth and had been investing in a lot of new things and said, okay, look, we're going to give this back to investors. You saw that somewhat with dividends, but that was less so. That was really buybacks was sort of the strategy of choice of what to do with the tax cut.
So how does it compare to what they promised to do with this money?
So really in line. So Apple promised a couple things, to spend $100 billion in buybacks, which that number there, that $72 billion, represents the first 3 quarters of last year. So, assuming what they did in the last quarter aligns with what they did in the first 3 quarters, they would about hit that mark. They also pledged to add about 20,000 workers. They did add about 9,000 last year, and then with the opening of the campus in Austin and others, they're on track to hit that by 2023, which is the benchmark they set out for that.
Now, how does potentially tougher economic times impact all of these plans? Apple in particular has cut its forecast for the quarter. There's a big iPhone slowdown. Do we think that will impact what they do with any extra cash they have?
It certainly could. They could, some of the big plans they had, it's very easy for them to cull those back a little bit or defer or delay. And this is really sort of the story of this tax and trade intersection is companies started last year, they were giving big bonuses. They were super excited. They were said, look, I can invest a lot and get a great tax break for it. But then as all the trade turmoil with China started heating up, companies, car companies, for example, they saw all of their tax benefits get eaten up by tariffs. That's something going forward, especially as it's really uncertain kind of where the talks with China will go. Apple has already said, look, we need to cut our expectations here. It's not going to be what we thought it was going to be. And the other thing to remember is that tax rates, that sort of this year, next year, for the next couple of years, these are the lowest corporate tax rates we're going to see. There's some kind of side provisions of the law that basically means that the effective rate that companies are paying will go up over time. So now is kind of the time to reap the benefits, and there's other headwinds that are stopping that from happening, essentially.
So in 2019, what are you going to be tracking in terms of where the money flows?
So the thing really to watch this year is, one, are people following with the promises that they said they would? We saw a lot last year of sort of one-time bonuses, one-time investments. What is this tax cut money? Remember, they basically had a 40% tax cut. Is it going, and how is it affecting sort of big picture macroeconomic factors? Republicans, when they passed this law, they said, look, we're going to hit 4% growth, no problem. That didn't quite happen. But Democrats said, look, this is all going to go to, buybacks and dividends. None of it's going to be invested in workers. None of it's going to be invested in research and development and new jobs down the line. That worst fear also wasn't played out. So it's really looking forward of, what are people doing with the money? How are they spending it? Are they manufacturing things here? Are they manufacturing things abroad? That was a big pull of this law, is to try to get people to store their intellectual property, manufacture things here. But a lot of economists and experts say, look, this is just not the world we live in. This is not the global economy. We may see this around the edges, and we may see some high-profile examples. But that's really to see how widespread the effects of this law will be.
All right, Laura Davidson, who follows the money for us. Thanks so much, Laura, for your reporting. Still ahead, can AI disrupt the real estate industries? VCs are betting big on startups like Rex that seem to think so. We'll speak to the CEO next. This is Bloomberg. Starbucks is expanding its delivery service with Uber Eats. The service will offer delivery in San Francisco Tuesday, expanding to Boston, Chicago, LA, and other U.S. cities in coming weeks. The company said it plans to bring delivery to nearly a quarter of its U.S. coffee shops in 7 cities this spring and will test programs in other countries this year. Starbucks said 95% of its menu will be available through Uber Eats. The expansion adds another high-profile U.S. brand to Uber's delivery arm following its deal with McDonald's in May. Well, more and more home buyers are taking their search online, using sites like Zillow and Trulia, Redfin. But while searching has evolved, traditional brokerages have been notoriously slow to catch up with technology, with high-cost business models and a 6% fee. Real estate startup Rex wants to close that gap. The LA-based startup is the first licensed residential real estate brokerage to circumvent the traditional broker system, using AI and machine learning to market properties to buyers at a flat 2% fee. Tuesday, it closed a $45 million Series C funding round, bringing its total funding to $75 million from investors including former Google executives and Crate & Barrel founder Gordon Siegel. Joining us from LA to discuss Rex CEO Jack Ryan. Jack, thanks so much for joining us. So your business model is somewhat untested. What makes you think this is going to work?
Well, it is tested. Actually, we've been in business for 3 years. We've now up to over $1 billion of homes listed and sold. So we're doing really well, and it's been very well tested. And in fact, it's been tested in other industries too. Think about how you hail a taxi today or how you trade shares today. All the other industries have done this other than this industry. So it's been very well tested, and it's working really well. And the benefit
MLS
to the buyer...
and, of course, Jack, realtors have been not excited about startups going around them. Do you think that receptivity is changing?
Well, I'm not sure it'll change with the residential real estate brokers, the traditional ones. It's certainly going to change for the consumers. The consumers, on average, save $20,000. They eliminate a lot of paperwork. It's faster. It's smoother. It's all the things you'd expect when you bring AI and big data to an industry that really has been people driving you around in a car, looking for that open house sign or something. It's just a much better way to sell a home or buy a home, sell bonds, buy bonds, stocks, et cetera. It's the same thing that most of your viewers who come from the financial sector are used to, just applying those same techniques to the financial services.
So give us an idea of the kind of volume that you're doing. In the markets where you operate, what percentage of home sales are you getting?
Well, we're probably listing now between 5 and 10 homes a day at this very moment. We just launched 3 years ago. We're launching in 12 cities in the next 6 months, so the volumes are quite large. It's hard probably to find a company that's scaled as fast as we have in terms of the notional amount of transactions we're doing. So we probably will list $3 to $5 billion of homes this year alone in just our 3rd year of operation.
And what's your outlook for the real estate market going into this year? We saw somewhat of a slowdown at the end of last year, but nobody could really predict which way things were going to go. The markets are fast changing and hyper-local, which I'm sure makes pricing a bit difficult. What's your view on trends in 2019?
Well, it's hard. It is really hard to predict, but in many ways, this is why they ought to drive the fees down, because this is kind of like I noticed the passing of Jack Bogle this week. Remember the load funds, the 6% load? You'd invest in a mutual fund, they charge you 6% to invest, and that's in a stock. And that's kind of what happens in the residential real estate space. And this is relevant to your question in the following way. When you reduce the fees to move shares or bonds or homes, then the whole market goes up independent of what's going on in the overall market, because the assets underneath those securities become more valuable. As you drive down friction costs, underlying values, those assets go up. So I think residential real estate places markets are a great place to invest, because as technology hits the sector, the underlying assets will keep going up independent of the macro effects impacting the industry.
So that said, how is that impacting your pricing strategies?
The market or our technology, I'm sorry?
The market in general, the capriciousness of it, the political and economic uncertainty that we're experiencing right now.
Well, so for us, it actually helps us because on the buy or sell side, you want to limit the time that you're exposed to the market. And so if you can go faster, that's better for you as a seller or buyer. Because we're going around this kind of traditional, clunky, slow process to buy or sell a home and matching buyers and sellers through big data and AI, that time that you're exposed is much shorter. So on the buy side, not only do we help you buy the home, we help you with the mortgage, we help you with the insurance, we help you with the escrow, the title, all those other services, and make it one-stop shop so your transaction is shorter. The shorter the transaction, the less risk you have to the market. So actually, the volatility you're referring to is actually really good for technology companies like ourselves.
All right, well, be interesting to see how the real estate market plays out in 2019. REX CEO Jack Ryan, thank you so much for joining us. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. We are, of course, live streaming on Twitter. You can check us out at Technology and follow our global breaking news network TikTok on Twitter. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg.